All right. Well, welcome everyone. Thanks for joining. I will be going at it solo today here, and Josh is facilitating a startup weekend, startup challenge at LMU, and we have a hackathon going here. So I'm doing a quick getaway and going to be spending a half hour with you all as we dive into our usual Traction Lab office hours. So appreciate you all being in the space and excited to support you over the next half hour. We did get some questions pre-submitted, so excited to have that. But also we'll dive into our questions that were pre-submitted. So I'm going to warm up the chat here. So hey all for being here. Cool. All right. So with that, I'll get started with the first question we got in here. So I got a few questions that I'll dive into, and would love to have some live questions as they come in. But here's the first question. Threw it in the chat, and we'll also bring it on up here for all of you. But for context, the target customer of this B2B SaaS startup, they're targeting high school teachers who assign group projects. They're currently at the unpaid pilot stage. And their question is teachers love our student collaboration and peer feedback platform in pilots, but school districts won't pay and teachers can't expense softwares themselves. How do we navigate the school procurement process? I think that was actually one we did last week. So I already chatted through that one. So apologies for that going forward. So maybe here's the next one we got. So we tackled that last week. So I'll unhide that and throw this next question here. So the question here is another B2B SaaS startup. They're at the paid pilot stage. So for context, they're looking to target this customer. So personal chefs and meal prep services serving busy families. And so the question is, our 9 paying pilot chefs love our meal planning and client management software, but they all operate in different cities and won't refer each other's customers. How do we scale when our best growth channel, word of mouth, doesn't work across geographies? Some additional context: each chef serves about 10 to 30 families in their local area. Great retention and satisfaction, but growth is hyper local. Tried Facebook ads, but targeting personal chefs is nearly impossible. So considering building a consumer-facing marketplace to connect chefs with clients, but that's a total different business model. So I think, you got the 9 paying pilots, so way to go on that, getting them to actually opt in during the pilot stage. So kudos to this founder. One of the things we often talk about in terms of these marketplace type solutions is, having density is really key, particularly in a geography component of it, is really key. And so having a way to penetrate, outside of word of mouth. It sounds like that was a key way to go about scaling, but outside of that is maybe gathering what particular language they're using from a word of mouth. Additionally, is there some sort of rewards or royalty program that you can create that incentivizes that behavior of referrals? So thinking of if that's something that you need to scale, is there like an ambassador network or something that levels them up in the process and helps grow from that word of mouth strategy? Additionally, I think when you think of, if they're still thinking of it maybe as a pilot and not necessarily being a full paid customer, that might be a component of it. And so having them opt into that next, say iteration of them becoming a full paying customer and incentivizing that work might be a core component of it. But those are kind of the main thoughts that I have. Was one, how might you incentivize that process of them doing the word of mouth activities? And then is there something embedded in maybe the solution that will drive some of the additional referral components of it? And so when we think of the customer factory, you're really focused on that retention, which sounds like you're trying to leverage that, or not the retention, the referral component of it, which is great to fill the top of the funnel. but I'd also be curious of how you've leveraged getting those first few chefs and how can you replicate that going forward. So I wouldn't necessarily try to dive into too many more cities. I would try to see how you can create density in the current city that you're in. All right. I'll move on to the next question that we got submitted here. Throwing that in the chat for all of you here. But the question is, and maybe for context, this is again another B2B SaaS company. They're at the idea pre-product stage, so I'm still doing some of that discovery and validation work. Their target customer is supply chain managers at mid-sized manufacturing companies. And so the question is every supply chain manager we talk to complains about the same problems with supplier communications and tracking, but they all say, we've just learned to work it out. How do we validate that the people will actually pay to solve a problem they've accepted as normal? And so for context, they've done 40 customer interviews. Everyone acknowledges the pain, but has built workarounds, so spreadsheets, email chains, phone calls. When we ask if they've paid for a solution, responses are lukewarm, maybe $50 a month, or where their cost would require them at $500 a month to really make sense. So they're starting to wonder if they're a vitamin, not a painkiller, which I think you're on the right path. And so the way we often bring it in is having that kind of like thinking through the 2x2 matrix, where you're thinking of the problem space and the problems that this customer has needs to be both urgent and severe. And we're kind of not seeing, I would say, either. So in terms of, this is something that they say is a problem, but like doesn't necessarily like rise to the top in terms of like, wow, this is something we're losing a lot of money on, or what that looks like. And so one of the ways you can start to go down that path is, how are they quantifying this problem or the pain that comes from it? So are they, losing time, but does losing that time relate into losing dollars? In terms of supplier communication, are they losing customers because of that, and therefore they're losing X percent of customers on a annual basis, and so therefore by bringing in such a solution, we'll solve this bigger problem for them. And so I think maybe tying the supplier communication to something larger. So is the supplier communication a root problem to this larger issue, and they're not necessarily seeing the connection to what the outcomes or negative outcomes of having bad supplier communication look like. And so when we think about it, we want to have that 2x2 matrix, or I guess in this way for you is both that are urgent and severe. So it has high urgency and high severity is where we want to be focusing our energy. And so one of the ways we can test that willingness to pay is putting some sort of offer in front of them, and that could be a facade of whatever the solution might look like in terms of the communication tool, but moving from that discovery into validation. So that discovery is all about identifying the problems that exist, seeing if there's actually urgency and severity around it. And then as we turn into that validation, we're really moving into the willingness to pay. And so some of the tactics are, actually putting an offer in front of them, or trying to see, hey, we would run this pilot, but this is what the price tag would look like. But I think one of the things that's missing is there's currently not this quantification of what that problem looks like for them. So that's what I would highlight and focus on going forward. So I'm going to turn to the next question here, but I'm going to engage the chat here. What questions do you all have? For me? And so just to reiterate those that are just hopping on, it's just me today. JDM's running a startup challenge at LMU, and I'm taking a quick break from our hackathon to come engage you all in this process. So thanks again for plugging into our office hours, but would love to get your live questions as well. So I'll head into this next one here, throwing the question in the chat, and give me 1 second. There it is. So there's the next question I got for you. So again, another B2B SaaS tool here. The stage is product is live, but they're pre-revenue. So they've built the thing, but haven't captured any value back. Their target customers are dog trainers who run group obedience classes. So very interesting there. And the question is dog trainers are excited about our class management and training tracking app, but mostly only teach part-time, and most of them only teach part-time and make $20 to $30 an hour. At what price do we become a rounding error for them versus an actual expense they have to justify? So some additional context is they have 150 free users, mostly training 1 to 3 classes per week as a side business. They're not serious business owners, no business bank accounts. Most use Venmo for payments. When we mentioned $29 a month, several trainers laughed and said that the more than they spend on marketing, wondering if that market can even support software pricing. So I think there's a couple things to be thinking about. Is this the right target audience that you're getting in terms of the dog trainers? So part of it is you've made it a free sign up. And so you get likely the people that like see the value that you're trying to create, but there's not the willingness to pay. And so you're getting the freeloaders to engage in that process versus those that actually have maybe that urgent, severe pain point that maybe haven't come across the solution as of yet. So is there a class of dog trainers that are a little bit more serious, or they're in the process of saying, hey, I'm moving from this stage of being a part-time teacher to then doing this full-time, and I need to have a more robust tracking system and class management type system going forward. Additionally is quantifying, like I said on the other one, quantifying the pain point. So if this is something where they actually don't really realize they're spending a ton of time, in that case, time is money, trying to manage just people canceling or things going on, or that they're losing people after a certain period of time because they're not properly tracking and telling the story of the dog's progress. Then that could be something as well. But part of it is, I think, the quantification of the pain point isn't there to then demonstrate why that $29 a month would be worth it, right? So if they're only seeing, hey, I make $20 to $30 an hour, well, they're like, how many, I have to at least do one of these a week, which, actually, seems like it pays for itself pretty quick. But if you can help them see in terms of that overall return on investment, right? And I think that's the disconnect is either that pain point isn't something that's really there. And then secondly is if it is there, it might not have the severity or urgency tied to it. So they're seeing like, oh, I'd push that off, or it's not really something that I would ultimately pay for down the line. So I wouldn't say give up on it, but I would say, how can you try to transition some of those free users into being paid users and seeing if any of those stick? And if so, what is the reason that those stick versus the other? And then how do you get in front of those that actually stick as paying customers? So cool. So that's the dog trainer question. So I got a few more here. So thanks again, everyone who submitted those questions ahead of time. I know I'm burning through them since we only have one of us chatting today, but want to make sure we get those questions in the chat that for all of you that are actually here in the space. So come on, throw those questions on in there. Hopefully I can get you to do so. But I will then move on to the next question that was submitted. Give myself a breather here. All right. So a lot of these are earlier stage, which is great. So in terms of this next question here, again, another B2B SaaS startup. They're at the unpaid pilot stages. So always a question, not a question mark, but a yellow flag there. The target customer is craft breweries with tap rooms that host events. So the question is, brewery owners love our event management and ticketing platform and pilots, but they only host 2 to 4 events per month. At that volume, our monthly fee doesn't make sense compared to using Eventbrite per event. How do we price for low frequency users? So some additional content is 5 breweries are in pilots. They host trivia nights like live beer or live music, beer releases, and sporadic components. The Eventbrite charges 3.5% and $1.59 per ticket. We're proposing $79 a month for a brewery doing 3 events with 40 tickets each. Eventbrite is actually cheaper considering usage-based pricing that creates unpredictable revenue for us. So I think the big thing that stands out to me is you're focusing on a cost-driven business model. So everything is about how you're going to be cheaper, even though you're not. So you're kind of trying to position this as something that's competing on a cost, or that's the main driver for your customer, is that they're looking for a low-cost option, which oftentimes price is a major component of it. But especially if you're the premium option, it's all about demonstrating what value you're providing to them. So how is their life better having used your particular platform for event and ticketing management? So yes, maybe you help them do all the registration, but do you provide more insights? Do you have a better user experience? Like, are those people that sign up through it getting more engagement or more follow-up or whatever that might be? And so are you adding additional value outside of purely the registration? If that's something where you're just competing on the same set of features and offering and then just a higher price point, yeah, they're not likely to move forward, but you need to articulate how you're actually creating additional value for them. Additionally, I think the challenge we've set in this unpaid pilot precedent is that, there are no it's obvious that they're going to use you in an unpaid pilot because you're free compared to Eventbrite's current registration fees. And so when you then turn on the paid, it'll be interesting to see like what that engagement or lack thereof in conversion ultimately overall looks like. And so we want to identify how we want to move through that process. And so I recommend, trying to peel back, not just that we're competing on cost, but on delivering a particular value. So if it's something they're purely trying to just, hey, we just want ticketing, then yeah, maybe that's not the right solution. But if it's something that they want more, or they want to be able to track the long-term engagement of certain users or certain ticket goers, then that might be a different offering. So I would focus on more of what value you're bringing than just the cost component of it all. All right. Here we go. See if there's, all right, we got, I think, 2 more questions here. So thanks to those that submitted and those that are online. We're a little quiet in the chat, so would love to hear what questions you all have. Or else I'm going to be running through this and it won't even make it to the half-hour mark. But would love for you to show your questions in the chat. But we'll move on to the next one. I think I got one more after this. But this next question is, it's another B2B SaaS startup. They're at the paid pilot stage, so great on getting the conversion for a paid pilot. The target customers is registered dietitians and private practice. The question is our 14 paying pilot dietitians use our meal planning and client tracking software daily, but insurance reimbursement rules mean they need specific documentation features that vary by state. Should we build for all 50 states or focus on a few? Each state's insurance rules are slightly different for what dietitians can bill. Building compliant documentation for all states would take 2+ years. Most dietitians practice in California, Texas, Florida, New York, considering launching those 4 states only, but then eliminate 60% of the total market. So, great question. I do highly recommend narrowing it down to a state or 2. And if there are states that have more similar, overall rules, then you can maybe focus on those ones. But part of it is when the go-to-market strategy for each of those is likely to be not necessarily different, but if you're very broad, then it's going to be very hard. And you're also going to have to build a different technical solution on the specifications. And so we always recommend really wedging into the market. And yes, you're leaving technically 60%, but you're starting with, say, 4 states. That's overall 40% of the market. And so when we think about that law of diffusion of innovation, which I guess in this case is for you that way, so we want to target that first 16% of the market, which are those innovators and early adopters. And so when we penetrate into that market space, we're then able to ultimately grow and then penetrate into those other states. And we can then replicate the strategy that worked in ultimately capturing those particular customers in that state. So I would not build for all 50 states. I would narrow that down into those first likely paying customers. Again, taking that early adopter pyramid approach. Are there states that have a higher propensity of these dietitians that are actually looking for it? So they have the problem, they're aware they have the problem, they're actively searching for it, they've hacked together, and then they have a budget. And is there a larger set of them based on, hey, there's higher regulation or this pain point looks different in a different area? So I would highly recommend starting in one particular state or two. So that would be my recommendation there. So looks like Ken got a question in here. So thank you, Ken. So I'll share that. You're not going to be able to see the full thing. But the question here I'm going to read is, I have various restaurant and wine bar clients. The wine bars are generating revenue, but each is looking for something that will create differentiation and improve revenue. They are in college towns, and of course, a large portion of the population can't drink due to age. They are small, 1,500 square feet, can't really raise their glass prices. They do small food plates, which are generally not a profitable aspect. They are frustrated with trying to increase business when arguably the demographics age won't support that, looking for new options. So yeah, I think, I think one thing that stands out is the current younger generation also is drinking a lot less. So when we think of, wine bars, and particularly wine in general, has actually had significant decrease in sales since the pandemic. So that was like actually the one alcoholic beverage that really decreased in sales over the pandemic was wine. And so, part of it is, if they're in the college towns, like what are some of the additional like things people are trying to do? So are they engaging in, art or other things? And so they can maybe activate through various different types of events, or is it, you don't necessarily want to repurpose it, but you often see, and I think we have one of these in downtown Sacramento, where it's a coffee bar by day, wine bar by night, and there's kind of a membership model associated with that. And so I think oftentimes trying to drive like exclusivity to that space, so where maybe there's a sense of like ownership related to, hey, I want to come and engage in this space, and this is where I do my studying by day, and then at night, if they do drink, maybe they have a glass of wine. But I do think the targeting the college demographic can be challenging, particularly with wine. But there's a great example from Blue Ocean Strategy, the Yellowtail wines. They actually targeted the like college age in like kind of first coming of drinking age by switching the way they labeled their bottles, the size of the bottles, all of the things. And so they actually kind of broke the mold of the wine industry by targeting that particular demographic, whereas most wine bars and probably wine brands target much older people because of based on demographics and all of those components of the palate and all the things that come along with that. So I don't know if those kind of spur some ideas, but I think thinking of the asset, is there activation of the space that can help drive that? Is there a pivot where, during the day it's something different, and then they associate that kind of value proposition less with like just it being wine, but a connection to community or a place? And so, maybe being some other type of value they're getting out of it just outside of the wine and alcohol, right? Are there other options, that they're going to in terms of, I don't know where this place is, but like if they're, Davis, are they going to G Street Wonder Bar? They're obviously looking for a different type of experience than if they're going to a wine bar. And so oftentimes it's the value is not necessarily in just what the beverage is, but it's the environment that we're trying to create. And so does the wine bar potentially seem not as accessible to college students because maybe they don't feel like they have the palate or other things? And so are there palate test, training classes or something that they can create where it's maybe less of, how much do they get to drink, but how much do they get to learn in the process and learn about how wine's made and what it means to, get to be a sommelier or something of that sort. So those are just a couple ideas I throw out there for you, Ken, but great question there. So appreciate the context. So I'm going to bring up Crispus's question here. So The next question is, hey, Cameron, suppose you're building a platform where people learn AI through live sessions and online courses. If you were starting from scratch, how would you build traction first? Would you focus on getting great tutors who attract learners, or on helping engineers find work right away? And how would you make it grow fast without a big budget or brand name yet? So great question. The example that actually comes to mind is Masterclass. So Masterclass kind of had that chicken and egg problem as well, right? You want to attract, the people that are going to teach these courses, while also then those that want to learn overall. And so what they did was they went to, in the case of Masterclass, the first set of audience was actually chefs. So it was people that were going to teach classes on how to make certain types of food. And when you kind of go down that path, I think you want to start with identifying from a sign-up perspective those that are willing to teach the class. That's my perspective, but you ultimately need both. And so part of it is positioning why would they want to teach here versus somewhere else, right? How are they currently trying to do that? Is it that they're trying to level up their credibility and looking for some other opportunity? Is it that they're looking for passive income and so they're going to make the most on this type of offering? Is it a place for them to be creative? But one of the things that you can do is create a sign up list that ultimately drives that type of interest. And so Masterclass, before they even built the technology, they built sufficient wait list on either side. So they went to, one, the demand side. So the people in your case that want to be tutored, they had them basically sign up for, hey, here's my name, my email address, and here's my home address. So they got the home address because it was a cooking type class. So in this case, is that something where maybe you send them a little tutoring kit? And so if they're willing to give you their home address, then that's something valuable that you can grab a hold of. And then that would be sufficient to maybe demonstrate, hey, we have this whole wait list of people that would be coming and teaching your classes, we have a whole bunch of people that want to be taught by you. And so therefore, this is a great vehicle because you're going to be able to make income or whatever value they want to get out of it. And then what they did was they took those sufficient wait lists, some investment. I think there are sufficient ways. And again, it's not just necessarily, hey, put your name and email, and that's building a wait list. If there's ways that you can gather more information from them, the more information you get, the higher credibility and strength of evidence that you're getting related to that. And so you don't necessarily need to go build. There could be, a clickable visual of how you're ultimately demonstrating that going forward. But overall, I think it's one of those chicken and eggs, but I think if you can, one, go to the to those that are actually going to be teaching the classes, understanding what they want to get out of it, and how are they currently trying to solve this problem now, and why aren't their needs being met? And then on the other side, how are you differentiated from the edXs and others of the world? I guess the live sessions is certainly a component of it. But with that, can you get sufficient sign up on that end? And then now you can take that credibility and evidence to investors to get funded. So that would be my recommendation there. So feel free to add any additional questions you got there, but appreciate those additions. If there's a follow-up questions, Ken or Crispus, to that, I'm happy to take them. But with that, maybe I will see if there's one more question here. So there's one more question that was submitted that I'll take. If there's none in the chat after that, then we'll call it a Friday. But appreciate you all joining. So the next question here, this is a marketplace. The product is live. It's pre-revenue. They're targeting busy parents planning kids' birthday parties. So the platform connects parents with local entertainers. So think magicians, bounce houses, face painters. But parents are only planning 1 to 2 parties per year. How do we build a marketplace when customers barely repeat? Additional information is 2,500 parent signups, 80 entertainers listed, completed 45 bookings in 3 months. Parents love convenience, but we have almost no repeat business. Each booking generates $8 to $12 in commissions, considering expanding to other events, so schools, festivals, corporate events, or pivoting to a vendor management tool for entertainers. So yeah, I think the viability of this is certainly in question. So you've gotten some interesting components of it being, some parent signups, 80 entertainers. I think the question you did put pre-revenue, even though you said you made, you would make $8 to $12 in commissions. And so thinking through like, what is the estimation of that? And does that even like work out to the type of business that you want to run? So one of the things we often start with is like, what is your minimum success criteria? So thinking of in 3 years, what is the minimum place that you want your business to be? And if it's like, I want to run $1 million startup in 3 years, working backwards to say, okay, if we want to be running $1 million in revenue company, working backwards with an 8 to 10 or $8 to $12 in commission. So let's just say 10, you need to then facilitate how many transactions. So you need to facilitate, say, if it's $1 million, you need to facilitate, 10, is that 100,000? Yeah, 100,000 transactions through the platform. And is that even feasible to get done? So then it's like, okay, that's probably not likely to happen. And so we either have to pivot in terms of who we're targeting or pivoting ultimately how we get more transactions through the platform, or maybe how we ultimately monetize going forward. So what I'm seeing is like, I think it's an initial like basically brokerage. So you're just brokering that deal. But after the fact, this thing only takes place every now and then. And so isn't a high ticket transaction. So are there other, decisions outside of just birthday parties that they're ultimately, trying to solve for in this similar type of way? So that would be my recommendation. But one of the great ways is to like start to map that out into what we call your customer factory blueprint. And so start with like, what does that success look like in the future? And then working backwards to say, based on this revenue model of on average $10 in commissions, that would mean we need X number of customers a year or an annual recurring space. And then from there, how many do we need to get in front of in terms of them actually activating on our platform? And then what's the conversion rate from us acquiring them to our website, ultimately then to becoming activated to then becoming revenue, right? And so then when you start to get there, is like in a given year, you need to get in front of, 1 billion people to get to the number of paying customers to make this worth your while. So I think the area I'm seeing a major gap is kind of in that viability. It just might not be in the cards based on the current monetization. And so are there other levers that you might be able to shift, or is this just not something that has currently the prowess to be able to get to that next stage? So cool. All right. So I'll give it a minute or two here. So I'll just do some final wrap-ups. And if you have an additional question here live, feel free to throw it in the chat. So thanks, Ken and Crispus, for your questions here live, and those that did submit it ahead of time. So just again, JDM's running the startup challenge at LMU. We got a hackathon going here at Sac State. So we're both active in the traction space and building startups from the ground today. Applications are open for the Traction Lab, so feel free to plug in and apply. We'd love to have you plugging in and getting support as we go forward. Again, we're live every Friday, 12 to noon, or 12 to noon. We just stay in time there, 12 to 1 or 12 to 12:30 if we do it alone. And then also another Zero to Traction will be coming your way as we go forward. But we did get some additional, I sufficiently filibustered here going forward. So let's see what Ken had to say in response. So great recommendations. Thank you. We have discussed coffee in the AM before 3 p.m. and could extend to later in the day. We'll have to brainstorm on what else we could do in the early hours before wine time. There will be certainly a transition period, and we'll have to consider if there are any other activity early in the part of day that could be beneficial and revenue generating for sure. And it also could be things that you don't run. So is there like not necessarily that you want to become an event space, but is that something where you host a weekly, every Wednesday, you host 1 million cups, or you host things that bring people into the space, and now they see that familial connection to it. Familial meaning, just comfort and connection to the space. But there's some of those types of things. So programming obviously helps. Additionally, is there partnerships with like their PBID, so property business improvement districts, that will help try to activate it. But in general, I think finding some sort of connectivity. But I think going back to who is that kind of audience, do you have different audience for that morning time versus the evening, or do we want to like create a connection in the morning to then prove out the evening as well? And then lastly, Christmas's follow-up question. So thank you for giving the insights. I'm planning to start by offering a few free live courses first to build trust and then move to paid ones later. From your experience, is that the right way to build traction, or should I charge early to set value? How would you approach that balance between growth and revenue in early stages, so I can show something for customers? So really great question. I mean, from a Traction Lab perspective, we always push to see if we can get a signal of willingness to pay early and often. So part of it, yes, is trying to figure out what the right price is, which is often where like the sticking point for a lot of founders is. But often what happens is when we give something for free, the value they are getting is different because it's associated with it being free, versus if you put a price in front of them, they're going to think differently. And what we don't want to have happen is we give it to them for free. They say they're getting value, and then we go to ask them to become a paying customer. They're like, yeah, I actually never really wanted it in that fashion. I actually just liked it because it was a free offering. And like, I saw that was sufficient value for me spending the time in that fashion. And so one of the things that we can do as we engage in the discovery process and talk to these people that are signing up is like, how are you currently trying to learn about AI in these classes? And, what solutions are you using, and how much are you paying? And is that meeting your needs? Would you be willing to pay more? Right. And so having those types of discovery, you can start to see how they quantify the problem. And then that'll help us associate what they're willing to pay to have that problem solved. So if we can front load that, I would recommend it. One way, if you do give it up for free, was like you could do free for a certain period of time, and then a price signal at the end of it. So they sign up for a 7-day or a month-long trial that then converts to becoming a paid customer after that. And so they actually put in their payment details, and then they have the ability to cancel. But that's a better sign of willingness to pay than just saying, hey, you have it for free, we're going to turn on payment at some other point, because then they can just opt out at that point. And I think you'll get a stronger set of evidence. So someone actually giving you information and signing up for a free trial with the intent of that I'm paying X amount per day, and then that'll also foster that discussion going forward. So, but really good question. I think one of the things I'd recommend looking up, we often talk about the ladder of evidence. And so, yes, getting users engaging on the platform and, getting classes is certainly, hey, there's some level of traction, but that next level is like, okay, can I get them to actually pay me for it? And then do I retain them with that payment going forward? So I highly recommend looking up the ladder of proof or ladder of evidence, and how you can move up that ladder to demonstrate to investors that there's more and more evidence there. But with that, I will call it a day. So thank you all for joining in. Thanks for hanging in there with me solo today. Wishing Josh a great day in LMU. We're here hacking away and building solutions. Thank you all for being entrepreneurs and taking the risk to get started. And don't hesitate to reach out to Josh and myself if there's specific questions that you want to have answered. Again, we do have an opportunity. If you're not able to attend, feel free to submit to that ahead of time. We'll address those questions on Tuesday or Friday in our office hours. So thank you again for